Good afternoon and welcome to Lunchtime Marketing and Leadership Series with Kevin and Craig, where we add value to people's lives, happening every Thursday on ebizradio.com. You can catch the Lunchtime Series on all major podcast channels, and joining me as per usual, marketing and communications expert and co-host Craig Page-Lee. How are you doing, Craig?
Kevin, I'm well, thanks. Yeah, hope you had a good weekend and hope you're appreciating the slightly fresher weather, the taste of the winter to come.
Yeah, I already had the fireplace on today. I was like, the house was so cold. I was like, okay, let's put the fireplace on. We put the fireplace also. So I'm nice and crispy sitting up here.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, no, I definitely nowhere near that. Just I'm in a freezing cube, but I do enjoy this. It's invigorating weather.
Greg, so last week we continued on our topic of rewards and loyalty programs, but this time we looked specifically at the key trends and drivers in South Africa. To this extent, what can you share with our listeners as the key reminders from last week's conversation?
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. So, yeah, to jump straight into it, the key reminders are extracted from the sixth edition of the white paper that we covered, titled The 2021 South African Loyalty Landscape. This edition was published in September 2021 and was compiled by Truth and Brand Map, a study that covers the top 30% of South Africans by income. And the white paper is a really insightful document that covers the broad South African industry in great detail. And the few points that stood out for me are noted as follows. So firstly, 74% of economically active South Africans use loyalty programs, Kevin, and that they belong to an average of 8.7 programs compared to the 14 programs the Americans belong to. Brands, however, need to gain a really deep understanding of the year-on-year trends in respect of the number of programs that customers subscribe to and actually what their utilization of the programs are. Is it growing? Is it declining? Is it static? And a few constructive years of the same percentage utilization can definitely signal saturation in the market for such programs. And as such, any new program or any evolution of an existing program really must be far more compelling in value and benefits than the existing program. Brands also need a really good understanding of program usage by gender. And this was quite an insightful point because, as you'll recall, there's a dramatic change in these patterns with males actually increasing their take-up of usage and belonging to such programs post the pandemic, Kevin. Brands also need a good understanding of program usage by age. The study noted very similar usage in the sort of 80 to 81% usage across ages ranging from 35 to 65, and that's a hell of a stretch. So it's really important that a deep dive in data analysis is undertaken to really understand how to package value across each of those subsets. Brands also need a really good understanding of program usage by income segment and what benefits are enjoyed most, again, by gender, age, and income segment. And lastly, Kevin, any participation in such a program needs to be easy and seamless across the entire experience journey. Yeah, no jumping through hoops just to get to register. Easy to use the physical and digital options. And again, the point we noted there, South Africans actually post-pandemic prefer to use the physical plastic card again. Must be easy to redeem the points. There has to have a function. There must be a functional app in place, even to support the plastic cards, and deliver value. Do not make customers spend an entire year before they see any value in rewards for the brands that they associate with. And yeah, those are the key reminder points from last week.
Yeah, Craig, I'm still astounded by the fact that South African participants on rewards and loyalty have signed up to the average of 8.7 loyalty programs per person. I mean, that's quite a large one.
It's quite astounding, but it's easy to get there if you consider. So obviously I've got Woolworths, Shoprite, the Checkers card, eBucks, Clicks, Pick and Pay, Smart Shopper. There's 5 right there.
Yeah.
Dis-Chem 6. So I'm sitting with 6, and I only use 3 of them actively. I actually just want to cancel the rest.
Yeah, it's like you're just having a nice wallet full of extra cards that we fill up our wallet, and that drives me insane. I don't like that at all. But now that we have a deep understanding of the loyalty programs, what are we actually going to be discussing today?
Yeah, Kevin, I want to discuss the topic of high performance teams. And what are the characteristics that define such teams, and what impact do they actually have on organizations, particularly in light of the fact that we had a really good look at the importance of the middle management layer sort of some 3 weeks ago in one of our conversations.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to this because this is like, as you know, this it excites me.
Yeah, and I must admit, I'm looking forward to your input and contribution to the various points that I've managed to uncover. So let's start by taking a look at the definition of the term high performance team. So, referencing Wikipedia, we note that high performance teams is a concept within organization development, referring to teams, organizations, or virtual groups that are highly focused on their goals and achieve superior business results. High performance teams outperform all other similar teams, and they outperform expectations given their composition. The Center for Education notes that a high performing team demonstrates high levels of synergism, the simultaneous actions of separate entities that together have a great effect on the sum of their efforts. And that's the 1 + 1 = 3 proposition.
Yeah.
High-performing teams require a complementary set of characteristics known collectively as SCORE: cohesive strategy, clear roles and responsibilities, open communication, rapid response, and effective leadership. Those 5 principles making up SCORE.
Yeah.
But also thought it appropriate to compare some of the differences between a team and a highly performing performance team, Kevin. And a great article on managementstudyguide.com notes the following. A team comprises of 2 or more people grouped to achieve a common objective or a goal. On the other hand, high-performance teams are objectively more focused in approach and better than the usual work teams. The members of a high-performance team work towards the achievement of synergies and business outcomes and attainment of measurable results by aligning all of their resources. High-performance teams are an extension of regular teams, having a higher sense of commitment towards the objectives of mutual purpose, which defines the existence of a group. And each team member plays the role of a partner in achieving outstanding and measurable outcomes. High-performance teams serve more significant benefits than usual teams, as the focus is on mutual accountability. Role expectations are clearly defined, and the members can share ideas creatively and collectively.
Craig, I like the whole SCORE acronym because, just on that point, cohesive strategy, I still today, working in a leadership space, working with teams specifically, you still find very, very specifically how, teams running very large organizations don't have a cohesive, clear, definitive strategy on how they're doing what they're doing.
Yeah.
So just that very first point on what is the strategy? Does your organization really permeate? Does it come out of the skin of your people? Like how clearly defined is the strategy? And and I think long gone are the days where you can sort of have a sort of kind of strategy, right? If you look at highly effective teams and teams that perform optimally, everybody knows what they're doing. Everybody has their roles. Everybody knows how. There's a certain criteria. There's a certain behavior set that's set at a certain level, and no one deters from that. And there's a very strict kind of protocol almost for people to follow. And yet, some organizations have this hierarchy kind of system, and they run thousands and thousands of people. And they're not clear on their strategy. You go from one leader to another leader, and you kind of go, this doesn't even make sense. You guys are speaking 2 different languages.
And that's absolute evidence of an organization that operates just as a collective of individuals, because then you get the individual performance, you're getting individual action, and you're getting individual purpose. And it's only when you start combining those components to start structuring a work group where there's some kind of coordination and some kind of overlapping purpose. When that's in place, you're really getting closer to the alignment of the strategy. And when there's pure intent and strategy in place, it's united in performance, united in purpose. And you know, on the back of that, obviously you're going to have better results and everybody wins. It just goes without saying.
Absolutely. Craig, so I mean, you mentioned the term score in the definition earlier. So can you further expand on the concept for us, please?
Yeah, Kevin, absolutely. It is a great term, and I was quite delighted to come across it. And it was described on the Centre for Excellence website, ceglobal.com, and it opens with a really great paragraph. And it states the following: despite society's emphasis on individuality, the critical work of business today is undertaken by teams. Take note, whether real or virtual. The success of organizations can be closely linked to how well these teams of diverse individuals perform, and it is clear that some teams truly do excel. And Kevin, certain studies that were undertaken by this group over the past decade actually highlight the following key elements as critical in performance organization, and those key elements actually were collectively related to create the term SCORE. And that then became a framework for the Center of Executive Education to actually measure and rank high-performing teams. So let me take you through the acronym. So obviously S, starting with the first letter, is about cohesive strategy. And high-performance teams have a cohesive strategy, and they demonstrate this by articulating a strong uniting purpose that is common to all members of the team. They also work together by defining their team values and the ground rules. And they develop a team charter, which actually is the guiding principle for their actions, which is absolutely fantastic. And they're incredibly clear about what they do, and they have their defined key results areas, the KRAs and performance standards embedded in everything they do. Yeah. So the second letter of SCORE is C, so that's the clear roles and responsibilities. So successful teams determine the overall team competencies, and then they clearly define the individual members' roles and responsibilities. So it's output and fitting in as opposed to competencies and trying to force the business within that. High-performance teams realistically examine each other's responsibilities in terms of personality, interest, the ability, and resulting in an accurate understanding of each member's accountability and contribution to the team. And the accountability is an incredibly important concept in this whole proposition. The third letter SCORE is open communication. Developing an open communication and trust-based partnership is the key component in facilitating successful team performance. And in fact, trust is probably the most important criteria for any performance, whether it's individual performance or team performance. Trust really is a key driver in that regard. Effective communication, however, includes flexing and adapting one's style of communication to suit the other team members, and a cohesive culture is attained when that interpersonal interaction flows smoothly and individual differences are respected and leveraged to actually enhance the overall team's functionality and capability. The fourth letter in SCORE is R, which is rapid decision making. High-performance teams need to be adaptable and respond quickly to changes in the environment, shifting their mental models with creativity and outside-the-box thinking. And when faced with problems, the teams brainstorm possible solutions and create innovative resolutions, leveraging disruptive leadership competencies, including key components of agility, adaptability, cognitive readiness, and critical thinking skills. And then the last letter in the SCORE proposition is exemplary leadership. Effective leaders can adjust their leadership style depending on the task at hand and the skill level of each team member performing that task. And when we looked at that middle management layer previously, we looked at the various levels and characteristics of leadership and types of leadership, and it's important to be able to adjust that leadership style relative to the task at hand. Effective team leaders also demonstrate effective emotional and social intelligence, competencies including empathy and relationship social management skills, as well as playing a crucial role in raising morale by having coaching conversations with the team members, providing feedback, continuous feedback loop to improve individual performance and both individual and team performance. And then lastly, effective team leaders actually take an active role in guiding their team through each of the stages of development on the back of the likes of team building activities, and most importantly, they celebrate success, something that is so missing in many organizations, Kevin.
Yeah. Craig, one of the things that just listening to this, one of the things that I always share, especially when you're going through a program and getting, a leadership team to all start really getting on the same page to become high performance, is one of the presuppositions that we use in NLP. And I think I've shared this with you before, but it's the law of requisite variety. And I want to use the specific words because it speaks to, it's a state that the system or the person with the most flexibility of behavior will control the system. And if you look at the exemplary leadership skill, your decision making, your open communication, your clear roles and responsibilities, and how to then effectively impact that strategy. If you are not flexible in today's world, and you're not really at the able to take the bull by the horns and really just have the flex in the ability of what it is you're doing, you're not leading a high performing team, right?
Yeah.
And it's that agile ability to be very far less rigid, and far flexible in how how you take the approach you're taking. And I think it fits smack bang in the middle of this. And I just love that you're bringing this up. But I mean, what I find fascinating about the SCORE model is the similarities to some of the points referenced in the article 8 Characters of High Performing Teams and How to Build One. I shared the article on LinkedIn a while ago on the characteristics noted were really believable and compelling in their definition.
Yeah, Kevin, I thoroughly enjoyed reading the article, and I immediately, when I came across the SCORE proposition, went and found that article again, and I had a look at the two components, because when you're sitting with 5 on one end, and then you've got 8 characteristics on another end, and some frameworks are talking about 3 and 12. I actually thought, let us have a look at where those overlaps in definition are.
Yeah.
And actually unpack some of the core characteristics from that article. And yeah, I suppose it goes with the territory of many of these subjects is that they are quite resolute models and fairly defined extensions of that, but many authors are able to adapt those and build on those and shrink those, and you're inevitably going to get various permutations. But going back to the article you mentioned, I think it's worth mentioning that the characteristics need to be looked at in a bit more detail, as the collective of the articles we reference really does give us the broader context. So if you don't mind, I'm going to take us through that in detail. For our listeners, the article you shared in LinkedIn was originally published to quantumworkplace.com on the 8th of October 2020, and it was written by Kristen Reiber. And I really appreciate the simplicity and the exactness of the opening paragraph of this particular article, and it reads as follows. Why do some teams perform better than others? What sets them apart from the rest? High-performance teams are composed of individuals with specialized expertise and complementary skills who are goal-oriented and hyper-focused to achieve clear, outstanding results. With the right approach to performance management, you'll empower them to collaborate, innovate, and produce work at the highest levels.
Craig, and I've coached many leaders and many teams as leaders, leadership development coach, and I can wholeheartedly confirm that every team I've come across is different. But with that said, there are definitely some underlying similarities and common characteristics that I've encountered in working with high-performing teams.
Yeah, Kevin, I can well believe that, because in the various organizations I've worked in and with both here and globally, there are key characteristics that you see across the various teams, but the construct and makeup of the individuals in there is fundamentally different. So let's look at those 8 characteristics, and then I'd like to get your point of view on them as we go through. So the first here is high performance teams have clear goals tied closely to team and organizational priorities. And this means that the teams are aligned in their focus, their purpose, and their priorities, and that they set team and individual goals that support that shared vision, so that their work actually drives that achievement. Their goals are not only aligned, but they're actually clearly defined so that everyone knows exactly what they need to do and how to get there. And when everyone knows their goals, they actually know how to cross-functionally work to support the others in driving the program forward. They point, yeah, go. Did you want to say something?
Yeah, no, I just on the point on the language you're using as well. I think sometimes people, when people hear the word goal, I've worked with a number of clients before. When they look at the word goal, they feel like there's obstacles in their way to be able to get there. So, even if you frame that, especially around what kind of vision you have for where it is you're going, you can reframe it to just about anything. But, goals in itself, people, if we don't have some kind of vision, some kind of forward movement, some kind of direction to where it is, what it is you want to attain, it's not going to be high performing. It's just going to be people going through their usual processes of day-to-day kind of work that they're doing.
Yeah, just the jobbing function, correct? Yeah. The characteristic number 2 is they understand how their work fits into the organizational mission. So actually quite a nice build on the point you've just made.
Yeah.
When employees understand how their jobs fit into the context of the overall goal and mission of the organization, they're definitely more engaged and productive. And that's a point that we've discussed on a number of occasions, Kevin. And an important here is that high performance team know their why, and they therefore work together to support that shared vision.
Craig, I'm on this point. I just want to make just one single, just add slightly to it. The thing about knowing why you're doing what you're doing is so important is based on largely one of the very crucial things around biases, right? When certain things in your organization start happening and you're seeing, yes, people moving into different positions and they're adjusting and there's different roles happening and people instinctively go to their own bias and they kind of go, oh yeah, it's because this person, he's this person or he's being chosen because of that, or why. They immediately, but when you have your why clearly defined and everybody knows why, none of that comes into play because they know why the business is doing it. And that comes back to the vision, and that comes back to, clearly defining and really having that vision of where you're going. And that's why it's so important to understand it. Without the why,
leadership.
Yeah, and leadership actually defining that. Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. So point 3 is the defined roles and responsibilities. So high-performing teams minimize all the unnecessary conflict by defining each person's role and responsibility. And this prevents confusion over project ownership. It keeps the workflows and deadlines quite organized, and it ensures accountability across the board. And this is probably one of the most important points, accountability.
Yeah.
Point 4 is they communicate clearly and respectfully. Coming out of the SCORE model, a nice overlap there. High performance teams set clear expectations and channels for communication so everyone knows when and where to communicate and who they need to communicate with. And conflict is normal, but high performance teams know how to navigate in a healthy way that doesn't create more obstacles.
Yeah. Do you know, I think when it comes to communication, people get it confused very often with, because I'm a leader, you're supposed to listen to me, right? That's a lot of the time that's what I come across. I'm the manager, or I'm your line manager. You're supposed to take an instruction from me. And we've discussed the Great Resignation. We've discussed how companies are changing how they do remote working, and how remote working is influencing where people want to work and how people work, and that brings us back to values, right? Right, and there's so many conditions and parts that go with effectively communicating. A simple thing like active listening. I still, at levels where you're dealing with CEO to Manco executive levels of business, the managing partners don't know how to listen effectively. And then as you're working through the ranks of the business, one of the clearest defined troubles that come out of working closely with organizations is we as the employees feel like we don't get listened to. Like, and you kind of go, how are you so disconnected? What is this disconnect? And it all comes back to communication, right? Like taking the time to not speak, because half the time people think, well, if I'm speaking, then it sounds like I have something to say and that makes me important. But part and parcel of really effectively communicating is not speaking.
Yes.
Right. So, and there's so many attributes to communication. So communication as a subject matter, I mean, we should have a show about communication. We should do a complete show around this because there's so much of so many attributes to it. And never mind empathy being one of the biggest, foremost necessities of leadership in the world today. Right? How do I empathize? What does empathy look like? What does it behave like? What does it think like? And how do I relate to that? And do I relate to that? Do I know how to show empathy? The other one is the types of language that I use within my organization, right? How does my language in what I'm saying and what words I choose to use as the leader of the organization, as the team of or the leader of this team, how do I reinforce language that suggests and is actively and cognitively chosen so that I'm actually thinking about how that translates and how that communicates. So there's communication in itself is quite a large chunk of like subject matter that can be covered actually.
Absolutely, Kevin, and I really think that is a great point. We should have a look at an entire dedicated show to communication because the reality is, I love the phrase, when you speak, you think you've been listened to and you've got something to say, so you come across as important, and that just is absolutely nonsense.
I mean, even Craig, from your perspective, you work in communications, like, the importance of how language will affect the end message at the end of the day, and I think, in organizations today, when you're looking at high performance teams, it needs to be constructed. That's why there are people like you and me, right? We have jobs because that's what we do. We help people construct information to that degree so that when it's languaged, it is not languaged in a way that it offends or it steers your vision or it insinuates anything. It is specifically chosen so that, very often in training, I'll get to a point where I'm talking and I'll stop and I'll actually go, guys, hang on, I'm just trying to find the right language.
Yes.
And I'll pause and I'm like, the word I'm looking for is, and then I say it, right? I'll actually stop in mid-sentence based on the fact that I know that if I don't use the right language and if I'm not cautious enough, that at the end of the day, in front of a group of 40 people or 50 or 60 people, you're kind of going, oh, I said something and that's not what I intended to say.
Yeah, right? Yeah.
So
yeah. And to that point, Kevin, so the clear and honest, open communication, it's and again, it's not about an instructive communication. It's about collective communication between the team members and between management of the organization, and that really is the backbone and the foundation of a high performance team, and it becomes the glue that actually holds the team members together, because when you're able to communicate effectively, which means you're able to listen effectively as well, you're able to take in, digest, and respond in the correct way. And when that open communication is steadfast and the trust builds deeper into the team, well, the end result is better performance, more cohesive team, better outcome. So really it is about creating a favorable environment, and communication is most definitely an enabler in that, Kevin. No doubt about it.
And Craig, just last point, then I'll stop. Is like one of the things that I think, and this is why I make such a big emphasis on it. If we look at the state of the world that we're in today, right, we almost brush it under the carpet that bad behavior or the things people say is okay because other people do it. I take, for example, Will Smith walking up in the Oscars and smacking someone in the face because he's Will Smith. And also Chris Rock, taking responsibility for what he said about Jada Pinkett. like we have to be held accountable. Just because we see it, in government, or we see it from popular platforms, or we see it from high earning income people, you kind of like, it doesn't make it okay. Like somewhere, as the leader of the organization, you have to kind of be responsible for what what the performance of this team is. And if part of that is that you need to like what's the word I'm looking for? Like recollect yourself and really pull yourself towards yourself, is a saying that's always useful. To just actually, take responsibility for what it is you're about to do, because it's not just okay that we have bad behavior and it's like, oh well, the president does it, so I mean, like.
But that talks perfectly into the point of values, because behaviors are values in action, and then the world is in a bad state from a values point of view, full stop. There's no doubt about it. And the more microscopic we become in terms of looking at our own reality in South Africa as well, the behavior is just totally inexcusable.
Yeah.
And that points to the fact that there are absolutely no values that hold this society together in the country we live in. And communication is key there again as well. But one of the big challenges, I believe, is not put in place in organizations is, I don't know if there's enough effort put into helping team members understand and develop their communication skills.
Yeah.
And then applying them in a way that they're actually able to become more consistent in understanding, articulating, and contributing to the conversation and driving the business forward. And that then leads to a consistency in a high performance team.
Craig, there's a video that Simon Sinek shares, and he speaks about values, and he eventually, I don't know if you've seen that video, where he speaks about values are actually verbs.
Yes.
Values are
verbs.
There's an action that needs to happen, right? And you kind of go, yes, if you don't have that component and you don't know how to action and communicate that action of the value you're speaking of, you don't have a value. It's not a value you hold, right? There's actual behavior connected to it. And
Kevin, if you don't mind, there's an adage that I truly believe in. So for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. So if your values are the verbs and they're the actions of your behaviors are the actions of living the values, for every one of the non-correct actions, non-correct deliveries of the values, there's an opposite reaction. And that's detrimental to the organization and to you in your own personal space, considering your own personal values.
Absolutely. And that's why, having this conversation is paramount. And I hope, we have loads of people listening to us chatting about this, because it's a very important conversation. And I think in the world that we live in right now, it's a conversation we should have more often, actually. But Craig, like one of the things that also mentions, we like work deadlines based on priorities. What does it tell us about the work and deadlines based on priorities?
Yeah, so Kevin, the reality here is high performance teams focus on what matters most. And that's the first step of just being able to prioritize. And then they spend their time accordingly. They don't just dive in and tackle everything. It's a critical understanding of the actions that are required. So the teams understand that not all work has equal importance. Most important to understand that. And nor does it all have equal urgency as well. And then they're able to manage projects based on what the tasks are that have the highest priority and the highest, take note, highest impact on the organization, and they therefore keep the work aligned and push on to meet those organizational goals. And point 6 for me, again, I think all conversations need to start with this as the primary, and that is trust. They trust and respect each other. The high performance team members value each other and trust each person to do their job. They respect diversity of thought and experience. and they recognize that those differences make them stronger. And this is a point that we really elaborated on when we spoke about the diversity, equity, and inclusion, and the value that the DEI brings to the collective. And a culture of trust helps everyone, Kevin. It brings it allows people to bring their full selves to the job. Really, really important statement. That it allows them to take risks, it allows them to share ideas, and it allows them to innovate together. And there's a wonderful phrase that I heard at the end of last week, and that is that treat everyone in the team as a leader, and you'll begin to learn to trust them. Because if you're a leader, you're expecting people to trust you. And when you treat every single team member as a leader, you're going to respond to them in the way that you expect them to respond to you. And the automatic outcome there is a much deeper level of trust amongst the team.
I miss that. That's such a beautiful saying, Craig. Treat everyone as if they are leaders. Is that the saying?
Yes.
Treat everyone. And like we're at 6, I think I've mentioned this before, but like the 6 human needs, right? All of them being as important as the other, but the one being significance, right? When you make someone feel significant, when they know that I have significance, I'm important to why I'm here, I'm important to adding the value to this team, right? It's a human need that we have. We need to feel significant, because if I don't, I will find significance somewhere else where someone else does make me feel significant. And that's why people jump from job to job to job, and why there's so much attrition, because the environment in itself really doesn't make you feel significant, right? So when you treat someone like a leader, suddenly I'm like, oh, I'm a leader. I'm part of this trust circle. I'm part of the importance of what we're creating here. You're like, yes. And it changes performance. It changes the instinctive motivator of why people do it in the first place.
Correct. And therefore you're not in an egotistical state chasing a title to make yourself have relevance.
Yeah. It's amazing. I love it.
So, and the last 2 points here. So point 7, in terms of characteristic 7, is they celebrate success together and they recognize contribution. So high performing teams understand that success results from, firstly, team effort. They celebrate wins together, and they take opportunities to actually recognize and show appreciation for each of the team members' contributions. And this builds a strong culture of collaboration, Kevin, and it helps everyone feel valued and connected. And that, to the point you've just made, a sense of significance and relevance in that regard. And then the last characteristic is that they practice continuous learning. High performance teams value feedback, and they learn from their mistakes, as they too have room to evolve and improve. Yeah, because high performance team doesn't mean that you're at the pinnacle of performance. Still, it's learnership, growth, personal development is an iterative process. They look for opportunities to grow by adopting a feedback culture, and investing in ongoing team member development. And the continuous learning enhances growth and motivates the team for a much higher achievement.
Craig, I'm still waiting. I'm waiting for the organization, and maybe there are some out there that do it, but I'm still waiting for the organization out there who have a day in a week that's dedicated to growing. Like it's just dedicated to growing. So they dedicate the Friday, like Friday's growth day. And you kind of go, you're allowed to, as long as you're at work, growing yourself and learning or meditating or doing your MBA or whatever, you have a growth day on a Friday, for the whole morning or something. Set it up in a way that growing and growth in totality is part of growing your business. Because training and developing teams have the worst job when they have to kind of try and manage people's diaries of going, there's training here, you're going to slot in here, and then there's a deadline here. And why? Because the leaders of the organization haven't taken growth and the importance of growing people into consideration when they looking at the ROI at the end of the day. Part of the ROI needs to consider how much growth needs to go into that. Because if you consider that as well and growing team, you're not only doing yourself a favor, you're probably going to retain a lot more people in your company. That approach in itself will change how you do business.
I'm smiling as you say this because Kevin, it's such a relevant point. There are some complexities in all organizations sort of attaining that level of having a growth day based on the nature of certain service and production related businesses out there. It might not be achievable. But I think one of the continuous negative stances in this regard is so many leaders believe that when people are in learning mode, they're not in production mode, and therefore they're impacting on the bottom line. And when you have the entire organization taking 4 hours off in a day, they feel like the wheels of the business are stopped, when actually they need to understand that the wheels of the business are actually going to spin faster when that growth is absorbed and enabled and brought back into the business. So it's really a difficult one to try and get around as to how do you manage segments of the business to all experience the same opportunity around having time more for growth. And it got me thinking about the fact that there's so many incredible articles out there that are talking about the optimum, particularly in Europe, is the 4-day work week. Okay, because people are just being more productive and decisive in those 4 days, and if you can adhere to all the principles of what we've just spoken about today in terms of planning, understanding common goals, vision, purpose, your 4-day week inevitably could give you more output than a low 5th day. So if it's important to be seen to be having people present in the 5th day, I really like the principle of making that a growth day. And even if it's just half a day, as you mentioned. So you're being highly effective in 4 of the working days of the week, and the 5th working day, you're bringing personal development and journey making into the equation.
Craig, I've just recently, I've done group coaching for a large organization, and we were doing between 10 and 15 people on a group call, and went through some really great information on how you chunk information and how your brain actually uses information, and then got to a point where we actually started using coaching conversation and specific coaching questions on how to unpack information. And through that, we looked at just some of the organizations' problems they were having, like immediate problems that they were having in their teams. And we literally, on the call, in 1 hour, unpacked 3 or 4 different problems that they were experiencing in the immediate environment. And they, in that space, in 1 hour, we came up with solutions for all of their problems. And we went through almost, I think it was about 190 managers that we actually went through, right? Sure. It's a lot, and I was exhausted. Sure. But I gave them like an actual tool that they could take away from that moment, and kind of, I call it the 4 magic questions, because they really unravel information to a point where you're kind of going, oh wow, like I didn't realize that this could be a potential solution. And because they sort of found answers for each other's problems, they were unpacking as a mastermind group to kind of unpack information, right? So, when you're doing that and you're taking the time and saying, well, we actively want to unpack and have days where we are doing coaching sessions where you're actually, and that's why, maybe it's not a Friday, maybe it's a once a month you're just doing that, you're just solving problems. And it's solve the problem day kind of thing. But there has to be a shift, and I think there has to be a shift in how we do business. And I think we're gradually getting there, but I think it's still a long way. We're still a long way from discussing, what is the best way to actively get involved with solving problems and finding solutions and keeping people on solution track. Because, that whole, and this is, the strict part of the coaching session is, don't veer away from your pain and your pleasure. Don't focus on the pain. We know there's a pain. We want to move to pleasure. So we get them to focus, right? Yeah. We really get their brains speaking that brain language. And yeah, I mean, it's a fantastic kind of idea. And the more I do it, the more I'm like, no, guys, we need coaching. We need to do coaching group sessions. And I do it with every organization I work with now.
Fantastic. It's really important. Yeah, that's awesome.
Craig, so as we near, to the end of the show, what are the key takeaways or that we can share with the listeners for today? Because
Yeah,
we could be carried away.
we could, and we've
We have
read
to
a
do
lot of
shorthand.
articles. Yeah, absolutely. I came across numerous articles on this topic, Kevin. It's an incredible topic, and we've addressed some of them in detail here. But there's a really cool article titled "The 5 Key Characteristics of High Performance Teams," written by Ishira Prosak, a former Forbes.com contributor and internationally recognized communications trainer and coach. This article was published to Forbes Women section of Forbes, and it opens by stating the following. High performance teams consistently meet their goals. They work cohesively as a unit and are engaged in their work. What makes high performance teams so successful? Question mark. These 5 characteristics are key components of the team's success. So, and it's these characteristics that I'm going to use as the summary takeaway, because they actually encapsulate all the components that we've spoken about in the other articles today. So it actually starts with the point that I always believe is the most important, and that is trust. The biggest factor separating high performance teams from average team is trust. Without trust, Kevin, a team will never reach their full potential. With trust, however, a team finds their flow, feels more comfortable to take risks, and is able to work through challenges and conflicts as they arrive. Tensions, frequent miscommunications, missed deadlines, reduced productivity are all signs of breakdown of trust. And when this happens, it's more important to step in as a leader and identify what's causing that breakdown, speak with the team, bring them together, understanding what the problems are, and then put in some effort to rebuild the trust, because everybody has to be on board to be able to move the business forward. Point 2 is clear communication. Second only to trust, communication plays a huge part in the success of a team. High performance teams have a system in place to streamline and optimize their communication. They know when to call, they know who to call, they know when to email, they know when to Slack, when to and not to hop on the Zoom, and if they're working together in an office, when to simply pop into each other's office. And most importantly, they also use technology to stay organized and track progress on their projects. The third point is defined roles and responsibilities. Clearly defined roles and responsibilities help the teams maximize their productivity and reduce their conflict. And the high performance teams work well because everyone, again, as we mentioned earlier, plays their part in the collective success. And by defining each member's roles and responsibilities, it eliminates any confusion as to who should be doing what parts of the project. The fourth point is engaged leadership. An engaged leader provides direction, not micromanagement. Direction to help their teams achieve success. The teams perform at their best when they have full support of their leadership. And a good leader fosters a positive working environment and ensures that communication, trust, and respect are maintained. They set clearly defined goals and they outline the steps that are needed to achieve them. And the last point of this is collective goals. While each team member has their own responsibilities, everyone is collectively working towards that one large goal, and the individual work contributes to the project's overall success. And high performance teams aren't afraid to pitch in and help each other out to ensure that the goals are met. And that's possible because they understand their respective individual contributions to the end goal. And yeah, those 5 characteristics are the takeaway points for today.
Fantastic. Craig? I am in 100%. What is the word I like to use? When you are, goodness, it's completely left me now. I want to do congruent. I'm in congruence with what you said there. That's the word. Finally, Craig, what are we going to discuss next week?
Yeah, Kevin, I want to pick up on a topic we've never touched on before, and one that's actually quite important in the communications industry, both from a client and agency point of view. And so we're going to discuss the role that the independent bodies and agency bodies like Yardstick and IAS actually play in evaluating, benchmarking, and moderating both client and agency relationships in the communication industry in South Africa. And that includes managing the pitch process where they work with agencies, at least with clients, to evaluate agencies, to shortlist them, and manage the process of which a client will then select an agency through a pitch process.
Fantastic. Guys, you can catch the Lunchtime Marketing and Leadership Series every Thursday on eBiz Radio at 12 o'clock and on all major podcast channels. Craig, thank you for joining me, and I'll chat to you next week.
Yeah, Kevin, thanks.
Cheers.
Enjoyed it.